This is Mark Morton from Lamb of God.
Chad, this is Batman.
Gary Holt. Mark Picolodero.
Shavo here. Al Braun.
Chris Kale. Cristian Machado.
Justin Morrow.
Trevor Sterned.
Sobre la dosis.
Sobre la dosis.
Sobre la dosis.
SOBRE la dosis.
Sobre la dosis. It's a great metal podcast.
Jonathan Montenegro.
Jonathan Montenegro.
Jonathan Montenegro.
Jonathan Montenegro.
Jonathan Montenegro. Let's go!
You better be listening because I know where you live.
Jonathan Montenegro. Hi, this is Jeff Becerra from the band Possessed. I am going to read off these 3 questions from Jonathan and try to answer them the best I can. Hopefully I can do this in a take. From Jonathan, the list of musicians who cite Possessed as a major influence is like a who's who of death metal greats. Who were your biggest influences? Who were my biggest influences in the early days? I mean, that's pretty easy because, that's when, thrash was brand new and, death metal was just getting made. And so, surprisingly enough, a lot of the bands that influenced me were hard rock bands like UFO and, Black Sabbath and Boys to Cult and, oh my gosh, all those type bands. But whenever Exodus came around, that was a real game changer for me. Exodus, even before Metallica, Exodus were the kings of the big boys in the Bay Area underground. And, that's when we didn't even know what underground was. It was just we would go to our local clubs and see our friends play. And Exodus was the first band that I really, really got excited. The first pro band, them and Outrage, which was basically, it's pre-Exodus. Outrage was like a band that was some of the members from Exodus were in before they went to Exodus. But I would say Exodus, and of course Motorhead, which is pretty obvious by the way I play bass and sing. And I used to even put my mic up like Lemmy until I realized that was a little too over the top. And then of course like bands like Merciful Fate and a lot of the super hardcore punk bands I really liked. I liked later on like Discharge and Fang and TSOL, Agent Orange, so many bands, so many punk bands, and I kind of just mixed Venom, I can't forget Venom. I mixed like Motorhead and Venom and a lot of the hardcore punk bands, and just I remember seeing like a lot of the underground bands that were playing punk bands. It would have the singers would just be so into it, and they'd have these like cathartic like yelps that would come from their soul, and that was a real like turn on to me, and it just seemed cathartic. That's the word. It seemed like whenever we started writing, Possessed, our original intention from the get-go was to make the heaviest, most satanic, fastest band in the world. And so I basically just sang with the tools I had and tried to make the vocals fit. So without sounding arrogant, hopefully too arrogant, as much as I was influenced by all those bands, I was very careful not to be influenced by anybody and try to maintain something very, very original and something that's true to Possessed and unique to Possessed, because back then, there were so few of us, it would be like, it was real taboo to copy other bands. So, that's something we just wouldn't do. So the way the bands in the Bay Area Underground made a name for themselves is to actually just be super unique and individual. And our claim to fame was just being super fast and super heavy. So, I'd like to say it was talent, but back then it was more like, let's just be heavier. Okay, so the second one would be, second question is, what am I listening to lately? Are there any new bands that have grabbed my attention? This one I get a lot, and I would say there are a lot of new bands, but I don't know them offhand. I do know bands that have been around a while, like Sang with Sugar Bob, and I think that but I'm still old school, man. I still listen to all that old school. I have been having a reawakening of Cephalic Carnage. I was listening to that song Jihad, and that's been like on repeat on my playlist. And I listen to all the older bands still, all the Asians and Suffocation, Immolation, Incantation, the New York vibe, all the Asians, and of course the Florida vibe, Morbid Angel and Death and Obituary, and of course the Bay Area vibe, which would be Autopsy and Exodus, and of course black metal. Black metal still plays a pretty hard foundation of who I am as a musician. So like Dark Throne, Marduk, Belphegor, things like that. And like I say, I'm still pretty old school. Just give me some Sabbath and all those bands, and some Venom and some Ozzy and Merciful Fate. But that's about it, like I say. I'm sure there's a million new bands, or at least 10 that I'm just forgetting to name, but you know who they are. Any memories of my partnership with Chuck Shoulder that I'd like to share? Partnership. I think I told this a few times, but Chuck was one of the first, probably the first real musician to take a profound interest in death metal, and that was back when being death metal wasn't cool, and the media was really careful to deny the fact that death metal even existed. At first they would call it black and thrash, and which to me was like code word for we don't want to acknowledge death metal, but now it's a valid subgenre now, or genre. But so Chuck first corresponded through snail mail, and then later he actually moved into the Possessed fan club president Crystal Mahoney's house out in Antioch. And so when I'd go over there, I'd see Chuck, and he'd be sitting on the couch with his guitar, playing without an amp. Just, hey Jeff, what do you think about this riff? And Chuck was really looked up to Possessed, and you could almost say, and it has been said by the members, that he tried to kind of clone Death after Possessed, but Chuck is such a radical and such a monster musician and such a genius that his idea of what death metal was formed very quickly into, that whole Floridian kind of vibe, and it took a lot of, it took a lot of the foundations of what we did, and he kind of ran with it. But you can tell on Scream Bloody Gore, as well as all the early OSDM bands, before they threw the thrash out, there were bands like, Possessed and Death, and even bands like Cannibal Corpse. Their original demo had thrash in it, and Morbid Angel's original music had thrash in it. That used to be what I would say was a defining factor. It used to have thrash in the melody, but Chuck helped push that in the Floridian direction, which was, I guess, it's hard to say though, because Chuck is not like the bands that came after. He still does have a lot of that melody and that craft, which I love so dearly about Death. But anyway, so I remember we'd also get drugs out there. That was back in the 80s. And so I took a big mirror, and I lined up in speed, all our initials, in JB and CS, and big lines, and I gave it to Chuck, and he looked at it and gave his initials, and it was like a lot. So he was pretty either keen to impress me, or he just didn't trip. I think he just didn't even trip on it, because he was sitting there playing like, how you like this, how you like this? And then I was like, wow, man, I'm really flying high. And Chuck looks up to me, and he's like, fuck, I'm on 8 hits of acid. I was like, holy cow. And that's when I realized just how great Chuck was, because I was feeling like an insect, and if I would have been on 8 hits of acid on top of that, I'd probably be like sucking my thumb, curl up in the corner, trying to hide from. But Chuck was like that. He was just really great, and You know, that's actually the only time I ever seen him tripping now. And I remember he used to, when the precursors of Scream Buddy Gore is, he would come up and he'd be like, Jeff, listen, I sound just like you. And he'd be so happy about that and so proud of it. And being that we were both teenagers, I was really honored and proud of that. And I was happy for him and he was happy for me. And it was never this death or possessed versus death thing. It was always a friendship, and he was just a really, really great and wonderful man. Okay, I think that's it. Hopefully I didn't talk too long. Thank you, Jonathan Montenegro.